What is this, KBash? What the heck? Why are you reviewing Age of Empires? Prostagma, motherfucker.
Do you love doing an imperialism?
Me too.
It seems like everyone I know at least remembers these games, even if they've never played them. It's one of the great monoliths of the real-time strategy genre, and looking at them now, maybe it's not obvious why, but these games were incredible. I'm serious! It's a game about survival, the ebb and flow of resources, mastering the terrain, raising an empire up from the dirt, and crushing every smug prick who thought they could take you. These elements remain across the board. But how did Age of Empires rise to glory? This is part 1 of my look back at the Age of Empires franchise. It's 1997 and Princess Diana's been put in the ground, but there, on the horizon, a new IP from a fledgling studio, rising with the sun!
Donna E? Erictus.
Age of Empires, the first one, isn't the landmark experience it once was, but at the very least it set the base. These games, in case you don't know, set the player up with 3 dudes, a town center, and a whole lot of black. Unexplored territory, that is. The goal is to collect resources very tediously, pump up production by making more villagers, building up the empire by creating armies and constructing buildings that let you research, you know, how to write. Cause I mean, these guys are pretty unga-bunga, if you know what I'm saying. To make it simple, it's really cool having a giant empire, overwhelming power, and annihilating everybody. It's this ridiculous power trip that the RTS genre provides that I encourage people look into. Catapulting a hapless villager, priceless.
That's really it. The game isn't hard to understand. Instead, it's in the execution where the game stumbles.
One thing that really turns people off and gets other people absolutely about these games is the level of micromanagement required to play, or at least play without getting stumped. At some point, you're juggling like 20 or more idiots, giving them orders, and that's just villagers, right? Like, ignore the army. The actual act of getting villagers to do things is hard enough. Telling Buddy here to go gather food is fine and all, but when it runs out, he's just gonna take a break for all eternity. Until he gets some more work, that is. The game doesn't automate basically anything. It really is all on you. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that this game, unlike any other in the franchise, is working against you. I mean, you don't even get a scout or anything at the start, so all that dark space is really intimidating. Bad starts on random maps happen, you can get screwed out of resources easily enough. The pathing is bad, like a unit being told to go someplace can get stuck behind some trees, the AI unable to figure out where to go, and you'll just forget that they're there, and you can't see them cause they're camouflaged! There's no way to set a waypoint, like in later games you can click on an area for units to move to once they're created, but they just kinda appear in front of whatever spawning pit lounging around, sucking up your tax dollars. I can't protect villagers by placing them inside buildings, so that was frustrating to relive. I don't know if this is a my computer thing or whatever, but I kept getting weird slowdowns and lag in a game that my computer should easily run, so take that as you will. There's all these races you can pick from that aren't visually distinct but have different technology options and availability and passive skills. The balancing is really, really off. I mean, any tier list will show pretty clear tier delineations, and some races just straight up suck under certain random map circumstances. Okay, you get it, right? This game is absolutely prototypical. It's gonna be messy. But even with the AI issues and the lack of streamlining, it's also relatively unintuitive. There's tons of tooltips to read, there's so much stuff to learn, it's really a game to be researched. Speaking of research, the main draw of Age of Empires, I think, and one of its central mechanics, is progression. You progress by getting big enough, as it were, to move up in ages. From stone to tool to bronze to iron, you have to earn your empire every time, which creates a strong sense of investment in what you're doing. The gameplay focus tends to shift between ages as well, such that progression also tells a story, if that makes sense. From gathering in strange lands to fighting huge battles in sprawling landscapes, a narrative gets spun out of player choice. Notably, progression also involves researching new technology for your empire, you know, gold mining, bronze shields, literally the bourgeoisie, fake stuff that's not real. You've got to choose what to prioritize to maximize your strengths and counter the enemy. And also, you research tower and wall upgrades at the granary. Why? The game lets you win not just by destroying the enemy, but by controlling all the ruins in a map for an amount of time, or building an archaeological wonder and protecting it for an amount of time. This was cool and gave way to new avenues of late game gameplay. Everything successful tends to have an X factor, something somewhat intangible that draws people to it. I think Age of Empires did a lot of things well too. I don't care for the single player campaign myself, but the option to play through it is there. The game doesn't skimp on content. There's even an editor that exists. Now your secret wishes of designing your own story or making stupid armies fight each other are fulfilled. But I think the linchpin is, even though the game is based on historical things and engaging to play, it's also absolutely insane. There are so many Age of Empires memes, dude, and they all want to break down the complete absurdity of the gameplay because it's something that presents itself as semi-realistic. But I gotta give it up for the priest. This smug old bitch just chanting that ridiculous f***ing chant, and suddenly you can make enemy knights swap sides, steal enemy villagers, convert buildings to Christianity!
You know, I'm pretty critical of the game, and even though it was fun sometimes, it's still a hard 10 out of 10. In Jesus' name we pray.
It's 1999 and Stanley Kubrick's been put in the ground, but Ensemble Studios is back with a box. What's in the box? Look, there's a lot of RTS games that qualify for one of the greatest games of all time. This is one of them. I hadn't even played this game until this past summer, and even then, it's obvious. Quality's quality. Age of Empires 2 is like if you had all these sad-ass mashed potatoes just sitting there, probably tastes good or whatever, but then BAM! Gravy. If you don't like gravy, we are done professionally. That's it. Bye-bye, kid! Again, there's a single-player mode that's huge and looming, and it's not my cup of tea, but people enjoy it, and that's great. But I'm here for the mechanics. Every single thing that was working against you in the first game is rectified in this installment. It's really rare that you get a sequel that's so comprehensively better than the first. Let's take a look at some of these. Your population limit, which increases by building houses, is there on the screen instead of hidden on your houses like the last game. You get a scout at the start, a dedicated unit for scouting that requires no investment. This was huge for letting players get information they needed, where to expand to, the location of the enemy, and food supplies, and all kinds of things. Actually good pathing, so your units aren't getting lost in forests for days, thank God. The addition of fish traps, which are basically water farms in case you just can't get enough on the land. The game looks really satisfying in an intangible and ephemeral way. I think it just looks really sharp and plays quickly too. Tons of civilization options exist now, and tons have been added over the years, and despite a few bad eggs, the balancing has been pretty damn good over the years. Yes, there's a clear metagame, but it's changed with patches. You can set waypoints now so your soldiers have something to do immediately. I like constantly sending units into places I'm already attacking, personally. Kiting is still there like the last game, and micromanagement is improved overall with faster responding hotkeys. Villagers will actually start automatically working on stuff. Like if they're tasked to build a gold mine, they'll start mining once it's constructed. Town centers aren't just useless spawning pits for villagers anymore. You can actually garrison units into buildings now, and the town center will attack with arrows that scale with the number of garrisoned units. I can't express how helpful this is, and the town bell function is for defending against immediate threats. And once the threat is gone, you can hit the town bell to send everyone back to what they were doing. Seriously, so satisfying, dude. This game feels so good to play. Yeah, the gameplay is fundamentally the same, but the scale isn't even close to the first game. It used to be turning the Ooga Booga Club Boys into the Roman Legion or whatever. Now it's this sprawling, huge-scale empire struggle. And while the first had the potential for epic battles, this game nails it. I've seen a lot of crazy footage online of huge-scale naval conflicts and siege wars, but even something as simple as the patented Turkish mobile firing squad is so cool. Controlling a parade of Mongolian cavalry archers hunting down every last unit, this game never stops feeling good, until you're the one getting swept. The tech trees were massively improved across the board, like first of all, the different civilizations, though ultimately the same, were unique enough visually and in technology to feel like you were picking a character like in a fighting game. The team you care about, want to improve at, represent yourself with. These civs also gave team bonuses, giving each civ a unique flavor as an ally or enemy. Each civ got unique units and techs as well. On top of that, the upgrades were more intuitive, mostly because they were, finally in the right places, unlike the granary having wall and tower upgrades. I will say the amount of technology and the scale of the game is probably really overwhelming, and coming from Age of Mythology, that was my biggest fear, and it is scary to be sure, but with the automation and intuitive design, it comes together in a much cleaner package than the first. So if it's not already clear, this game is almost perfect. And we know this because it's still alive. I always hear, you gotta respect this or that old game because it was good when it came out. It was good for its time. I don't buy that shit because frankly, when I go back and play certain old games, I don't find them fun, and it doesn't matter how good it was if it can't last the test of time. And the old ones that are fun, I praise for lasting this long.
This game came out 2 years after the first, 1999. This game is alive, thriving, and incredibly fun. If you're gonna lecture me about what game was fun back in the day, shut your ass up.
The editor came back, it's still great. It is, much like Warcraft 3, integral to the game, surviving online as long as it has, with custom maps and games. It's got a slew of dedicated content creators, including a guy I watch, Spirit of the Law. He doesn't need a plug, but seriously, I got into this game because his videos showed up in the sidebar, and I don't know why. They're just soothing to listen to and so well researched. The competitive scene's been thriving for years thanks to the committed player base and excellent depth of gameplay available. I'm just a casual and I'm fine with that. There isn't much as relaxing as loading up a single enemy CPU against yourself and an ally and just coasting. And when you want to challenge yourself, the option's there. These games have such immense potential for all styles of play, all levels of play. That and the fluidity and breadth of gameplay have kept this game breathing for well beyond its time. If you like the finer things, try it out. On sale, whatever. It's a genuine piece of gaming greatness. So I guess I got some splaining to do. Age of Empires 2 is absolutely the pinnacle of the franchise insofar as the original concept being perfected is concerned. But if you want to know where my heart is, it's clutched there in Zeus's manly fist. I got this game one Christmas, and I think it may have changed my life. It's this warm and fuzzy dive into the world of myths and ancient history. If you could turn this game into clothes, it'd be a Snuggie. I'm not gonna lie, the aesthetics are 90% of my love for the game. It took Age of Mythology into the realm of 3D, and yeah, it looks doopy and old, and like, lol, is this a phone game? Shut up, it's art! The music is the best thing ever, maybe, and if you disagree, I will kill you. The studio put a ton of effort into the campaign mode, the cutscenes, getting quality voice acting in the game, and basically all the single player aspects are fully fleshed out and amazing, and I love them, but that's just nostalgia, right? Age of Mythology is important for another reason. Technically the game's a spin-off, but it's basically the same, no real reason to differentiate it from the main series. I mean, it single-handedly took the franchise in a new direction, and what it did is in equal parts destructive and innovative. Let's take a look. So Age of Mythology is a bit odd. It looks and sounds and plays like Age of Empires, but the fiends in the features, the monsters in the minutia, as it were. It took the setting into a magical place, still pseudo-historical, but now meteors can kill everyone and stuff. The new unit types were created not to contend with the game's pre-existing infantry, cavalry, archers, siege, etc., but with each other. Myth units and heroes. Myth units beat basically all normal units and cost a new resource, favor, to create, alongside whatever else. Favor replaced stone from the game's past. Myth units often had cool abilities that tipped the scales in their favor, from throwing other units to petrification. Myth units were dangerous. They were hard countered by hero units, however. Now, to talk about favor and heroes and all that requires talking about the structure of the races. No longer does one pick Macedonian or Italian or whatever. You picked one of 3, later 4, later 5 major races and chose one of their 3 major gods to worship. Each race had fundamentally different gameplay than the others. This was a huge departure because every race in previous games had the same gameplay, just different gameplay cornerstones. For example, Norse infantry build their buildings, not villagers. Egyptians don't use wood for building construction, but gold. The expansion premiering Atlanteans had super villagers that gathered on the spot in their dumb little donkey carts. This is hardly comprehensive, but every race encapsulated a specific style of play. So that whole identity thing from 2 got bumped to 11 just with fewer choices. What god you worshipped also mattered, as they also provided fundamental mix-ups to the chosen race's formula. Loki players were probably gonna rush hero units, while Odin players might pull Ulfsark or Jarl rushes. And then there were god powers. These powers let the player have a one-time ability like summoning sentry statues, turning an enemy unit into a spy, literally demolishing an entire enemy city. me! Some were weak, some were probably a little overtuned, but they were fun and impactful. Every time you advanced to a new age, you got a minor god to worship, which granted access to new units and unique god power. And the minor gods varied depending on the major gods, so there was just so much happening, but it all felt understandable and customizable. It was flavorful and fun. And it was a new thing in Age of Empires to control the options your empire had by aging up. In the past, aging up was just removing a gate to new technology. Here it felt like genuine progression, not just bar lifting. Now with the Titans expansion, which basically threw balance out the window, but was super cool anyway, we got the Titans. You could upgrade to the final Titan age in the end game and basically summon a Titan if you had the means. If the enemy wasn't packing weapons-grade heroes, they were just done. They were seriously so stupid, but I loved pulling them out in casual games, just squishing the competition. I think one of the major issues that came out of the 3, 4, 5 race system was that the actual depth of gameplay and diversity suffered. See, in Age of Empires, though not every race had access to every unit, there were way more units available to every given race than in Age of Mythology. You only get access to the myth units belonging to the gods you specifically worship. You only have like 2 basic infantry or so, only so many siege options, only so many cavalry units because each unit was race specific. No pharaohs in Norway, yeah? But in games prior, everyone at least had access to a commonality of options, and the games would evolve based on what one player built, how the other responded, and so on. In Mythology, it's dicks on the table. I got this, you got that, your race might trounce me here or there. They tried to shore up weaknesses in the latest expansion, but the game's been dead for a while, I don't know. The races each had their own imbalances, even generating favor was different across the board. Greeks had to pray at a temple, Norse players needed to do damage, Egyptian players needed to build statues. At the very least, each race felt unique enough that you could be a proud and knowledgeable X or Y player, you know? The game changed in more macro ways as well, with the basic notion of expansion warped completely. Gone were the days of the grid and building town centers everywhere. You could place buildings anywhere on the 3D plane and rotate them to your liking. It put more control in the player's hands, I think, even if the walls were a piss off. Town centers, however, needed to be placed on those predetermined settlements, something that had never been done before. So not only was the player not free to expand anywhere, but they had a limit to expansion options. Not only that, these points were often highly contested and centralized the gameplay. That is, if a player wanted to grow their empire, they needed town centers and had to drive other hopefuls off. The gameplay became more predictable, less sprawling than the past games. This was probably done to stop people from saving their empire with like a stupid town center in the corner of the map which would needlessly extend a game's length, and to streamline gameplay in general. Streamlining is a word you could apply to almost the entire game. Fish wouldn't run out anymore. They were as infinite a resource as farming, which didn't need to be reseeded any longer as well. The town centers defended themselves, acting like towers even without any garrisoned units. There were only so many choices to make and units to build. Smaller population caps meant fewer buildings needed to be built. There was an auto queue feature that allegedly destroyed the game competitively, but I never used it, so whatever. And lastly, even with each race being unique, there was less to actually learn between each race and their major gods than the previous game, and all the ludicrous stat variations that came with the 31 different civs and their unique techs. I've heard that this game didn't last long, with its online population dying off fairly quickly, and the competitive scene is clearly smaller than 2's, but the game surely isn't garbage because the Atlanteans unbalanced the game for a while. Competitive play was focused. People can say it had a lower skill floor and ceiling, and I'm not sure if you can quantify that or if it even matters. It still requires micro and macro management, prediction, efficiency, knowledge, the works. To call it inherently less skillful and therefore bad is supremely elitist. My argument is that Age of Mythology is the ultimate casual RTS player's Age of Empires game. It's got the aesthetics, it's got the setting, it's got the draw, and it's got the smart and strategic simplifications that make the gameplay digestible to a broader audience. Everyone I know who played this game loves it to death, and honestly, more power to them. I get that some people hate the mythology setting, which is insane to me, but I guess most RTS people are math or econ majors and hated English class or something. Sword and sorcery is lit. Suck it up, dweebs. Lastly, when I went online before the servers went offline, I would play these weird and wacky custom games, full RPGs, all that weird stuff you'd see in Warcraft 3. I was inspired so much I'd start making my own levels, not for play, but just to look at and walk through. The editor is so robust and interesting, letting you create your own campaigns and stories and even cutscenes if you want to. I spent a ton of time making these pseudo-epics, well, epics for a teenager, and I think If I didn't have the creative outlet I found in this game and its editor, would I be as interested in writing as I am now? Would I be a DM without that little spark of creation? The community was so lively and made so many beautiful, fantastical things. Just, Age of Mythology might not be the best, objectively or monetarily or whatever, but it was so vibrant, I think, and I think it's a shame where this franchise ended up, considering.